Right now, as you're watching this video, the Pantheon in Rome, a building nearly 2,000 years old, stands with the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Meanwhile, our modern highways crumble after just 20 years. Our bridges need constant repair. The concrete in our newest buildings will likely crack and deteriorate within a century. This isn't just an engineering curiosity. This is a $2 trillion question that affects your wallet, your infrastructure, your taxes, and reveals something profound about how we think about value in modern economics. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The Romans built structures that have outlasted empires, survived earthquakes, and stood through 2 millennia of history, and we still can't fully replicate their formula. In an age where we've mapped the human genome, landed rovers on Mars, and created artificial intelligence, we cannot consistently recreate what ancient engineers made with primitive tools and no computers. But the real story isn't just about concrete. It's about a financial philosophy, an understanding of value, cost, and time that we've completely lost. And that loss is costing us trillions. Let's start with numbers that should make you uncomfortable. The Pantheon's dome spans 142 feet across. That's roughly half a football field. It's been standing since 128 AD. That's 1,898 years without major structural repairs to the concrete itself. Now contrast that with the Sleipner oil platform in the North Sea. In 1991, this modern engineering marvel collapsed during construction. Concrete just gave way. Or consider the Willow Island disaster of 1978, where a cooling tower's concrete failed during construction, killing 51 workers. These weren't medieval structures. These were built with computer modeling, advanced materials science, and strict quality controls. The financial implications are staggering. The American Civil Engineers Association estimates the United States needs to spend $2.6 trillion on infrastructure over the next decade just to maintain what we have. Much of that, concrete deterioration. Here's where it gets interesting from a financial perspective. We're not investing for the long term anymore. We're building for the immediate return.
For centuries, we thought we understood Roman concrete. Mix volcanic ash with lime and aggregate. Add seawater if you're building near the coast. Simple, right? Wrong. In 2017, researchers at the Berkeley lab made a discovery that changed everything. They examined samples from ancient Roman maritime concrete structures. These have been submerged in corrosive seawater for 2,000 years. Under electron microscopes, they found something extraordinary. The concrete wasn't just surviving, it was actively getting stronger. The secret? A rare mineral called aluminum tobermorite. This crystal structure forms naturally in Roman concrete over centuries through a reaction with seawater. It's so rare in nature that finding it is like discovering diamonds in your backyard. Yet the Romans were inadvertently creating it in massive quantities. But here's the financial lesson hidden in this chemistry. The Romans built with patience encoded into the materials themselves. The concrete improved with time. They weren't just building for their generation or even the next. They were building for centuries they would never see. Compare that to modern development economics. We have something called discount rates, the financial tool we use to value future benefits. In modern financial analysis, benefits 50 years from now are worth a fraction of benefits today. A building that lasts 2,000 years has essentially zero additional value in our calculations compared to one that lasts 100 years. The Romans would have found this concept insane. Let me tell you about a man named Marcus Agrippa. In 27 BC, he built the original Pantheon. Agrippa was wealthier than most modern billionaires when adjusted for purchasing power, yet he chose to invest vast portions of his fortune into public works that wouldn't profit him directly. Why? Because Roman elite culture measured success differently. Your legacy wasn't your quarterly earnings or your stock portfolio. It was whether your buildings would still bear your name centuries after your death. The inscription on the Pantheon still reads Magrippa.L.F.C.O.S.T.I.T.I.U.M.FECIT. Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, made this in his third consulship. That inscription has been read by more human eyes over more centuries than perhaps any corporate logo in existence. That's a return on investment we've completely lost the ability to calculate. Modern financial theory calls this temporal myopia, our inability to properly value long-term outcomes. We're psychologically wired to prefer $100 today over $110 next year, even though the math clearly favors waiting. This bias infects everything from personal finance to infrastructure planning. The Romans somehow overcame this, not through superior rationality, but through a cultural framework that made patience prestigious.
Here's where the story gets even more interesting from an economic standpoint. The Romans didn't use just any volcanic ash. They specifically sought Pozzolana from Pozzuoli near Naples. This ash had unique properties. When mixed with lime and seawater, it triggered that special chemical reaction, creating aluminum tobermorite. They built an entire supply chain around this material. Ships transported volcanic ash across the Mediterranean. Quality control specialists examined each shipment. Engineers specified exact mixing ratios that had been refined over generations. This was sophisticated logistics, operating without computers, without real-time communication, without modern quality control technology. Yet it worked so well that the standards they developed lasted centuries. Compare this to modern construction. We have vastly superior logistics technology, but we use it primarily to minimize cost and maximize short-term profit. We substitute cheaper materials constantly. We value engineer everything to the bare minimum required by code. The goal isn't to build something that lasts a millennium, it's to build something that meets requirements at the lowest possible cost. There's nothing inherently wrong with cost efficiency, but we've lost the ability to even conceive of building for the truly long term. It's not that we choose not to build like the Romans, it's that our entire economic framework makes it nearly impossible to justify. Let's dig deeper into that aluminum tobermorite discovery, because the financial implications are profound. Modern concrete degrades through a process called alkali-silica reaction and reinforcement corrosion. Water seeps in, steel rebar expands, concrete cracks. In marine environments, this accelerates dramatically. Engineers estimate 50 to 100 years for marine concrete structures before major repairs are needed. Roman maritime concrete did the opposite. The seawater that destroys modern concrete actually strengthened Roman concrete through continuous chemical reactions. It's self-healing in a way we still can't fully replicate industrially. Research teams have tried. They've mixed volcanic ash, they've added the right minerals, they've even used samples of ancient concrete as templates. They can create concrete with similar properties in laboratory conditions. But scaling it to modern construction, that's where it falls apart. Because here's the thing, modern concrete needs to cure quickly. Time is money on construction sites. Workers are paid by the hour. Equipment is rented by the day. Financing costs accumulate. Investors want returns. The entire economic structure of modern construction is built on speed. Roman concrete took months to fully cure. Some ancient construction projects took decades. The Colosseum took 8 years to build. 8 years. Modern stadiums are often completed in 2 to 3 years, and any delays are considered financial disasters. This is the real secret we can't replicate, not the chemical formula, but the economic patience. Now let's talk about the consequences of our temporal myopia, because they're already detonating across the developed world. In 2018, the Morandi Bridge in Genoa, Italy collapsed, killing 43 people. The bridge was built in 1967, just 51 years old. Investigation revealed the concrete had degraded faster than anticipated. Meanwhile, just a few miles away, Roman aqueducts built 2,000 years ago still stand. The financial cost of America's crumbling infrastructure is staggering. The Texas A&M Transportation Institute estimates traffic congestion alone, much of it caused by infrastructure work and deterioration, costs the U.S. economy $166 billion annually in wasted time and fuel. But here's the deeper economic question. What is the true cost of building cheap? When we construct a bridge designed to last 50 years instead of 500, we're not saving money. We're deferring costs to future generations. We build it for $100 million today. In 50 years, they rebuild it for $200 million in inflation-adjusted dollars. In 100 years, another $400 million. In 500 years, that's 10 rebuilds at an exponentially increasing cost due to inflation and increased complexity of working around existing infrastructure. The Romans built it once for what would be $300 million in modern terms, and it's still standing 2,000 years later. Which is the better investment? Traditional financial analysis says build cheap now, but that analysis uses discount rates that essentially assume future generations and their costs don't matter.
Here's a financial angle most people miss. The Romans essentially had a monopoly on the world's best concrete-making material. The volcanic deposits around Naples were unique. This gave Roman engineering an insurmountable advantage. But they didn't treat it like modern resource monopolies. There was no Pozzolana corporation hoarding the material to maximize profit. Instead, it became a public good. The material was widely available to builders across the empire. The knowledge of how to use it was freely shared through apprenticeship and documented in texts like Vitruvius's De Architectura. Imagine if a modern construction company discovered a revolutionary material that made buildings last 10 times longer. What would happen? Patents, trade secrets, monopolistic pricing. The knowledge would be locked away, accessible only to those who could afford premium construction. This isn't speculation. We see exactly this pattern with modern advanced materials. High-performance concrete formulations are proprietary. Advanced composites are patented. The result? The best building materials are reserved for the most expensive projects. The vast majority of construction uses commodity-grade materials, optimized for cost, not longevity. The Romans made their best building technology universally accessible. We make ours artificially scarce to maximize profit. This difference in economic philosophy explains much about why their infrastructure outlasted empires, while ours needs constant replacement. Now here's where the plot thickens further. Even if we wanted to build exactly like the Romans, we face a material constraint they never imagined. The specific volcanic ash from Pozzolana has unique chemical properties due to the particular geological conditions in that region. While volcanic ash exists elsewhere, it doesn't always have the same precise mineral composition. And here's the kicker. Even around Naples, the easily accessible, high-quality Pozzolana deposits are largely exhausted after 2,000 years of use. Geologists estimate that truly replicating Roman marine concrete would require volcanic ash with specific ratios of aluminum, silicon, and calcium compounds. These conditions are surprisingly rare globally. You can't just use any volcanic ash. This creates a fascinating economic paradox. We have the knowledge to build better, but the raw materials are scarce. It's like knowing the recipe for a miracle drug, but discovering the key ingredient is nearly extinct. Modern science has tried creating synthetic substitutes. Fly ash from coal power plants has some similar properties. Researchers have experimented with various mineral admixtures. Some results are promising, but nothing has quite matched the performance of ancient Roman concrete in real-world marine environments over century-long timescales. Why? Because we can't run 500-year tests. We can accelerate aging in laboratories, but there's no substitute for actual centuries of exposure to real conditions. The Romans had something we desperately lack: empirical data from structures that have survived for 2 millennia. Let's examine something that financial analysts rarely consider: the philosophy behind engineering decisions. When a Roman engineer designed a structure, failure wasn't just a financial setback, it was a permanent stain on their family name and legacy. There was no limited liability corporation to shield them, no insurance policy to distribute risk. If your bridge collapsed, your reputation was destroyed forever. This created a completely different risk calculus. You over-engineered everything. You used the best materials available. You tested thoroughly. You consulted with other engineers. The personal cost of failure was so high that cutting corners was unthinkable.
Modern construction operates in reverse. Engineers design to code minimums. Contractors bid projects based on lowest cost. Developers maximize profit by minimizing material expenses. If something fails, there are insurance companies, legal protections, and complex webs of liability that diffuse responsibility. Nobody's name is carved in stone above the door anymore. This isn't a moral criticism, it's an observation about incentive structures. We've created an economic system that rewards short-term cost minimization over long-term value maximization. The Romans had the opposite system. The question is, which system is actually more expensive in the long run? Let's talk about something concrete manufacturers don't advertise: the environmental and economic costs of modern concrete production. Concrete is the second most consumed substance on Earth after water. We produce over 4 billion tons annually. The cement industry alone is responsible for about 8% of global carbon dioxide emissions, more than the entire aviation industry. Why? Because modern Portland cement requires heating limestone to about 1450 degrees Celsius. This process is incredibly energy-intensive and releases CO2 both from the fuel used and from the chemical breakdown of limestone itself. Roman concrete used lime that was fired at lower temperatures. The Pozzolana volcanic ash required no heating at all. It was already processed by volcanic activity millions of years ago. Their concrete had a dramatically smaller carbon footprint. Now add the replacement cycle. If modern concrete structures need rebuilding every 50 to 100 years, while Roman structures lasted 2,000 plus years, the environmental cost multiplies by at least 20 to 40 times over the same time span. From a pure economic efficiency standpoint, Roman concrete was vastly superior. Less energy input, lower emissions, dramatically longer service life. By any rational long-term cost-benefit analysis, we should be trying to build more like them, not less. But we don't, because our economic system doesn't capture these long-term costs in current pricing. This is what economists call externalities, costs imposed on society that aren't reflected in market prices. We're externalizing massive costs onto future generations, and our accounting systems don't even register it as a problem. Let's examine the economics of one specific Roman structure, the Colosseum.
Construction began in 72 AD and took 8 years, remarkably fast for such a massive structure, but still much longer than modern comparable buildings. The Colosseum was financed by the spoils of war, specifically the Jewish-Roman wars. Emperor Vespasian used the plundered wealth from Jerusalem to fund construction. This sounds terrible to modern ears, and it absolutely was, but it reveals something important about Roman financial thinking. They took wealth and converted it into permanent public infrastructure. Think about that. They could have distributed the wealth to political supporters, enriched the imperial family, or spent it on luxury goods. Instead, they built something that would entertain Romans for centuries and still stands today as one of the world's most iconic structures. Modern equivalents? Sports stadiums funded by public bonds that saddle taxpayers with debt for decades, while the facilities themselves need major renovations or replacement within 30 to 40 years. The economic comparison is sobering. The Colosseum has generated economic value continuously for 1,950 years. It attracts millions of tourists annually, generating hundreds of millions in revenue for Italy. Calculate the return on investment over 2 millennia, and it's one of the most successful financial investments in human history. Modern stadiums? They're often demolished within 50 years of construction, leaving nothing but debt and memories.
Here's something that should terrify anyone interested in civilizational resilience. We nearly lost the knowledge of Roman concrete entirely. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, knowledge of advanced construction techniques largely disappeared in Western Europe. The supply chains for Pozzolana collapsed, the apprenticeship systems broke down, the texts were scattered or lost. For nearly 1,000 years, from roughly 500 AD to 1400 AD, European construction technology was inferior to what the Romans had achieved. Medieval masons built impressive cathedrals, but they didn't have the concrete technology to match structures like the Pantheon. This represents an extraordinary loss of capital, not financial capital, but knowledge capital. Entire technologies vanished, not because they were superseded by better alternatives, but because the civilization that developed them collapsed. We tend to think of progress as linear and inevitable. Technology always improves, knowledge always accumulates. But the Roman concrete story proves otherwise. We can lose crucial knowledge, and it can take centuries to rediscover it, if we ever do fully. This has profound implications for how we think about preserving knowledge and technology. What other crucial understanding might we be losing right now? What technologies do we assume will always be available? The Renaissance wasn't just an artistic and cultural movement, it was an economic revolution driven partly by the rediscovery of ancient Roman knowledge. In the 15th century, scholars began systematically studying Roman ruins. They excavated ancient texts. Architects like Brunelleschi studied the Pantheon's dome extensively when designing the Florence Cathedral dome. They were reverse engineering Roman technology. This rediscovery had massive economic impacts. Better construction technology enabled larger buildings, which enabled denser cities, which enabled more complex economies. The architectural innovations of the Renaissance weren't just aesthetic, they were economically transformative. But here's what's fascinating. Even with extensive study, Renaissance builders couldn't fully match Roman concrete. They recreated the domes, the arches, the engineering principles, but the material itself remained mysterious. Why does this matter financially? Because it demonstrates that sometimes knowledge is more valuable than contemporary technology. Roman engineers with primitive tools and ancient knowledge could accomplish things that Renaissance builders with superior metallurgy and more advanced mathematics couldn't replicate. This suggests that we might be making a similar mistake today,
assuming that because we have advanced technology, we're necessarily building better. But are we? Or are we just building faster and cheaper? In the past 2 decades, there's been renewed interest in replicating Roman concrete. Research teams around the world have made significant progress. A team at Berkeley Lab studied samples from ancient Roman breakwaters and identified the aluminum tobermorite crystals forming over centuries. MIT researchers have experimented with using seawater in modern concrete mixes. Teams in Italy have attempted to recreate ancient mixing techniques. Some results are promising. Researchers have created concrete samples that show similar self-healing properties. They've documented the chemical reactions that strengthen Roman concrete over time. In laboratory conditions, they've replicated many of the key properties. But here's the economic reality. Even when we can replicate the material properties, we can't replicate the economics.
Modern construction contracts don't have clauses for concrete that needs months to properly cure. Project financing doesn't accommodate multi-decade construction timelines. Building codes are written for modern Portland cement. The entire regulatory and economic infrastructure of construction is optimized for speed, not longevity. A construction company that announced it would build using authentic Roman concrete techniques with the slower curing times and higher upfront costs would struggle to win bids against competitors using conventional methods. The market would punish them for choosing durability over cost efficiency. This is the real reason we can't replicate Roman concrete. Not because we lack the technical knowledge, but because our economic system makes it financially irrational to do so. Economists have a name for situations where individual rational decisions lead to collectively irrational outcomes, the tragedy of the commons. But what we're seeing with infrastructure is something slightly different. Let's call it the tragedy of the long term. Every individual actor in the construction chain is making perfectly rational decisions based on their incentives. Developers minimize material costs to maximize profits, rational. Contractors bid low to win projects, rational. Engineers design to code minimums to stay competitive, rational. Politicians fund projects with lowest upfront costs to show immediate results, rational. Financial analysts use high discount rates because that's standard practice, rational. But the collective outcome? We build infrastructure that needs constant repair, replacement, and generates massive long-term costs that dwarf any short-term savings, irrational. This is a market failure on a civilizational scale. The market isn't pricing in the true long-term costs, so it's systematically underinvesting in durability. Future generations will pay the price, and they have no way to participate in today's decisions. The Romans avoided this trap not through superior economic theory, they had nothing like modern financial analysis, but through cultural values that made long-term thinking prestigious and rewarded it socially, even when it wasn't immediately profitable. Here's a number that should make you uncomfortable. The American Civil Engineers Association gives U.S. infrastructure a C grade and estimates a $2.6 trillion investment gap over the next decade. That's $2.6 trillion just to maintain what we have, not to improve it, just to keep it from deteriorating further. But here's the deeper question. How much of that investment gap exists because we built cheap in the first place? If American infrastructure built in the 1950s through 1970s had been constructed with Roman-level durability, how much of that $2.6 trillion would be unnecessary? Even if it cost 50% more to build initially, if it lasted 10 times longer, the long-term savings would be enormous. This isn't just an American problem. The European Union faces similar infrastructure challenges. Japan's aging infrastructure is a national crisis. China is discovering that its rapid construction boom of the past few decades has quality issues emerging already.
Globally, we're facing trillions in infrastructure repair costs because we systematically chose short-term cost savings over long-term value. The bill is coming due.
Here's a connection most people miss. The climate crisis and the infrastructure crisis are intimately linked through concrete. Remember, cement production is responsible for about 8% of global CO2 emissions. As developing nations build infrastructure, that percentage is increasing. We're locked into a cycle. Build cheap concrete, it deteriorates, rebuild with more concrete, emit more CO2, accelerate climate change, which increases extreme weather that damages infrastructure faster, requiring more rebuilding. Roman concrete technology offers a potential way out of this cycle. Concrete that lasts 20 times longer means 95% less concrete production over the same time span. That's millions of tons of CO2 not emitted. Several companies are now working on Roman-inspired concrete formulations. Some use volcanic ash when available, others use fly ash or other pozzolanic materials that trigger similar reactions. A few startups are developing entirely new formulations based on Roman principles. But they face the same economic challenge, convincing developers to pay more upfront for long-term benefits that won't show up in anyone's quarterly earnings reports. The irony is that if we properly priced carbon emissions through carbon taxes or cap-and-trade systems, Roman-style durable concrete would become economically competitive immediately. The environmental costs we're currently externalizing would be internalized in pricing, and suddenly, building for longevity makes financial sense. This suggests our infrastructure crisis isn't really a technology problem or even a knowledge problem. It's a policy and pricing problem. Let me tell you about a fascinating modern parallel to Roman concrete: nuclear submarines. Nuclear submarines are designed to last 30 to 40 years. Their reactor cores are sealed at construction and meant to operate for the vessel's entire lifetime. Because the costs of premature failure are so catastrophic, both financially and strategically, submarines are massively over-engineered. The U.S. Navy doesn't cut corners on submarine construction. They use the best materials available, they test relentlessly, they build in huge safety margins. The upfront costs are enormous, billions per vessel. But the long-term economics work out. These vessels operate reliably for decades with minimal major repairs. The total cost of ownership, while high, is predictable and manageable, and the strategic value, maintaining naval superiority, justifies the investment. This proves we still know how to build for the long term when the stakes are high enough, and when one entity, the military, controls the entire life cycle and pays all the costs. The problem with civilian infrastructure is fragmentation. One entity builds, another maintains, taxpayers fund repairs. The consequences of failure are diffuse. Nobody has strong enough incentives to build like the Romans. What if we treated critical infrastructure like we treat nuclear submarines? What if bridges, water systems, and power grids were built with the same long-term thinking and quality standards? They'd cost more upfront, but they'd last generations with minimal maintenance. The total life cycle cost would likely be lower, and we'd stop dumping infrastructure debt onto future generations. Here's something that should keep you up at night. We're doing it again, right now, in our era. We're losing knowledge that future generations may desperately need. Take nuclear power plant construction. The United States built most of its reactors in the 1970s and 1980s. Then construction essentially stopped for 3 decades. Now, when we try to build new reactors, we've discovered we've lost much of the practical knowledge. Engineers who knew how to build reactors have retired, construction companies that specialized in nuclear projects have disbanded, supply chains have disappeared. The result, modern nuclear projects in the U.S. have experienced massive cost overruns and delays because we have to relearn what we once knew. This is the Roman concrete story playing out in real time.
We have the theoretical knowledge, the blueprints, the regulations, the physics, but the practical knowledge of actually building these things has atrophied. What other knowledge are we losing? Traditional shipbuilding techniques, certain manufacturing processes, specialty materials. Every time a skilled craftsperson retires without fully training a replacement, knowledge disappears. From a financial perspective, this represents a loss of intellectual capital that doesn't show up in any balance sheet or economic statistics, but it's real, and it has real costs when we need that knowledge again.
So where does this leave us? Are we doomed to keep building infrastructure that crumbles within decades while Roman structures mock us with their endurance? Not necessarily. There are promising developments. Self-healing concrete using bacteria that produce limestone when cracks appear is in development. It's inspired by Roman concrete's self-repair properties, but uses entirely different mechanisms. Carbon-negative concrete that absorbs more CO2 than it emits during production is being tested. Some formulations use recycled materials or novel chemical processes. 3D printed concrete structures can use less material more precisely placed, reducing waste and potentially increasing durability. But all of these solutions face the same fundamental challenge: overcoming the economic incentives that favor cheap, quick construction over durable, long-lasting infrastructure. The technical barriers to building better are real but surmountable. The economic and regulatory barriers are more daunting. Here's the uncomfortable political reality. Elected officials have no incentive to invest in infrastructure that will outlast their time in office. If you're a mayor or governor, spending money on 500 bridges doesn't win you votes. Voters can't see or appreciate the difference between a 50-year bridge and a 500-year bridge. Both look the same on opening day, but the 500-year bridge costs significantly more. Your political opponent will attack you for wasteful spending. They'll point to the cheaper alternative and ask why you're squandering taxpayer money. They'll win the argument, because the benefits of your decision won't be clear for decades after you've left office. So, rational politicians choose the cheaper option. They cut ribbons on infrastructure that will become someone else's problem. They defer maintenance costs to future generations who can't vote in current elections. The Romans didn't have this problem because they weren't democracies in the modern sense. Wealthy patrons like Marcus Agrippa could fund projects that would outlast them because their legacy and family honor were on the line. It was a different set of incentives, not necessarily better in terms of justice or equality, but more effective at producing long-term thinking. Modern democracies are brilliant at many things, but long-term infrastructure planning isn't one of them. We've created a system that systematically favors short-term thinking. What if we approached infrastructure funding the way we approach other long-term investments? Consider this. Sovereign wealth funds manage trillions in assets with multi-generational time horizons. Norway's government pension fund, Global, thinks in decades and centuries. They can afford to be patient because they're designed to be. What if we created infrastructure funds with similar mandates? Instead of funding bridges and roads through short-term bonds and budget appropriations, what if we created permanent infrastructure endowments? These funds could finance construction of ultra-durable infrastructure using Roman-inspired principles. The upfront costs would be higher, but the long-term returns in the form of reduced maintenance and replacement costs would justify the investment.
Such funds could also capture the externalities that normal markets miss. They could price in carbon costs, environmental benefits, and long-term societal value. They could operate on 100-year timescales instead of quarterly earnings cycles. This isn't fantasy. Some pension funds and sovereign wealth funds already invest in infrastructure this way, but it's a tiny fraction of total infrastructure spending.
Scaling it up would require regulatory changes, new financial instruments, and a fundamental shift in how we think about public investment. But it's possible. The financial tools exist. What's lacking is political will and public understanding of the problem. Ultimately, replicating Roman concrete isn't really about chemistry or engineering. It's about replicating a culture that valued patience and long-term thinking. The Romans weren't more rational than us. They had plenty of short-sighted policies and foolish decisions. But they had cultural mechanisms that rewarded building for the ages. Your name carved in stone above a bridge that still stood centuries later was worth more than any amount of gold in your treasury. We've lost that. We live in a culture of quarterly earnings reports, viral content that's forgotten in days, and political terms measured in years. Long-term thinking is actively punished by markets, media, and democratic politics. Changing this requires more than better technology or smarter economics. It requires a cultural shift in how we value the future. Some societies are beginning to recognize this. New Zealand has started incorporating the concept of intergenerational well-being into policy decisions. Some Scandinavian countries explicitly consider the interests of future generations in major infrastructure projects. It's a start. But we're still far from the Roman mindset that treated two-century construction projects as normal and desirable. Let me bring this all together with a simple thought experiment. Imagine two cities, identical in every way except one. City A builds everything as cheaply as possible. Roads, bridges, water systems, all constructed to minimum standards. This city saves 30% on infrastructure costs compared to City B. City B builds everything to last 500 years. Higher upfront costs, but dramatically lower maintenance. This city spends 30% more initially. Now fast forward 100 years. What do these cities look like? City A has rebuilt its infrastructure twice already. The constant construction creates traffic, disrupts business, costs jobs. The total spent is now triple the original construction costs. Much of the city is perpetually under repair. The economic drag from infrastructure problems is substantial. City B's infrastructure is in excellent condition. Minimal maintenance has been needed. The city has spent far less total money on infrastructure. Economic activity has been uninterrupted by constant repairs. The difference in total costs is staggering. Which city is richer? Which made the better choice? This isn't hypothetical. This is the choice we're making right now. Every time we fund infrastructure based on lowest initial cost rather than best long-term value. And the tragedy is that City A thinks it's being financially prudent, while City B seems wasteful. Our accounting systems, our political processes, and our economic theories all favor City A's approach, even though City B is obviously superior from any rational long-term perspective. So what do we do with this knowledge? How do we escape the trap we've built for ourselves?
First, awareness. Understanding that our infrastructure crisis isn't inevitable, it's the result of specific choices and incentive structures is empowering. It means we can make different choices. Second, advocacy. Demanding that politicians and planners consider total life cycle costs, not just construction costs. Supporting infrastructure bonds and investments even when they seem expensive if they're building for durability. Third, innovation. Supporting companies and researchers working on Roman-inspired concrete and other long-lasting materials. Creating markets for durability, not just cheapness. Fourth, regulation. Updating building codes to reward longevity. Requiring life cycle cost analyses for major infrastructure projects, pricing carbon emissions so that durable construction becomes economically competitive. Fifth, finance. Creating investment vehicles and funding mechanisms that can think in terms of centuries, not quarters. None of this is easy.
All of it requires overcoming powerful incentives and deeply embedded systems, but it's possible. The Romans proved that humans can build for the ages. We've just forgotten how. The question is, do we want to remember? I want to end with a question for you to think about. What are we building that will still be here in 2,000 years? When future archaeologists dig through the ruins of our civilization, if they do, what will they find? Will our buildings still stand, monuments to human ingenuity and foresight? Or will they find only rubble and rust, evidence of a society that could build anything quickly, but nothing lastingly? The Romans left us structures that inspire awe 2 millennia later. What are we leaving to the people of the year 4025? This isn't just about concrete or engineering. It's about values. It's about whether we care about people we'll never meet, futures we'll never see. It's about whether we're willing to sacrifice some short-term convenience and profit for long-term value. The story of Roman concrete is ultimately a mirror. It shows us what's possible when a civilization thinks beyond itself, and it shows us, uncomfortably clearly, how far we've fallen from that standard. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, we have the resources. What we lack is the will to use them for anything beyond immediate gratification. But that can change. It starts with understanding, which you now have. It continues with conversation, which I hope this video has sparked, and it culminates in action, demanding better from our leaders, our markets, and ourselves. The Romans built for eternity. We build for quarterly earnings reports, but it doesn't have to be this way. If this video made you think differently about the infrastructure around you, about how we value the future, about the choices we're making as a civilization, then do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Because here on Paper Reality, we're building something different too. We're building a community that thinks deeply about the financial decisions that shape our world. We're questioning the assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. We're looking at history not as dead facts, but as living lessons. Like this video if you found it valuable. It helps other people discover these ideas. And leave a comment. Tell me, if you could design one thing that would last 2,000 years, what would it be and why? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.